Hare Krishna. Question: what are the scientific proofs for reincarnation that are accepted by the body of scientific researchers? Answer: rather than proofs, we can focus on evidences. Now, evidences are those which contribute to a proof. It's like in a court case, evidence is presented and then it is for the judge to decide whether that evidence is, what is the strength of that evidence and whether it constitutes proof of complicity or criminality or whatever be the particular legality involved. So there is the conclusion which is to be had is ultimately within the individual head and heart, and that's why we can't to talk about proofs for the existence of soul is to make an overstatement. What we can say is that there are evidences, and whether those evidences prove the existence of the soul in terms that mainstream science will accept, that is something which is the jury is still out for that. So now, after clarifying this difference between evidences and proof, now when we look at evidences, also we have to understand that what evidences will be acceptable in the court of science. So as of now, science tries to operate on the principle of naturalism. So naturalism refers to the principle that natural phenomena should have natural explanations, and this most scientists consider to be the cornerstone of science and the essential requirement for scientific progress. So for example, in the past, when say in the medieval ages, when Europe was having the Black Plague, so there were some people who believed that the Black Plague is caused by some evil spirit infecting people and tormenting people. Now if that belief is accepted by science, then science cannot find out, okay, what was the science, if science will be able to work only when they find a natural cause. Okay, this particular disease, this plague is caused by this germ, and we find out the natural cause for that, and after finding the natural cause, then we come to a conclusion that yes, this natural cause gives this particular result. So what mainstream scientists argue is that if we start accepting supernatural causes or non-natural causes, then we stop the progress of science. So scientists often think that, by scientists I am using the mainstream body of science, not necessarily all scientists, that we should operate on the principle of naturalism. And that's why scientists are extremely skeptical about any non-natural explanations for any phenomena. So therefore, because the whole concept of soul is non-natural, in general, when in the scientific circles the word natural is used, it is equated with material. So in that sense, because the soul is a non-material entity, so scientists are usually skeptical about accepting the evidence for the soul, because they feel that no matter how much is the evidence available, still we should look for some natural explanations, because if we start accepting some supernatural explanation, then that may stop the progress of science. So that is why in general the evidence for reincarnation, whatever is available, that is subjected to a greater degree of skepticism than is the evidence in other fields of science. So for example, say consider theory of evolution. Often the evidence, even if it is not very strong, it is accepted because it offers a natural explanation for phenomena. And this is an unfortunate bias within the scientific method, within the scientific community at present, that any evidence for non-natural phenomena is subjected to a greater degree of skepticism. But still, even within that, evidence? So how can we work towards explaining or providing evidence for reincarnation? Then, and whatever cases are there, we have to see whether all natural explanations for those can be exhausted. And when no natural explanation is left, then the supernatural explanation, that is the explanation of the soul as the source of consciousness, as the explanation of the particular phenomena, that will become accepted. And then this acceptance, we can also show how this leads to the progress of human knowledge, not the stoppage of that progress. So let's look at this one by one. Science broadly has two distinct limbs. There is theory and there is experiment. So with respect to theory, basically there is some attempt to explain the observed phenomena, and this refers to general observed phenomena. For example, say there is objects which are released from a height, they fall. This is general observed phenomena, and for this Newton had the theory of gravitation. So similarly, if we look at the observation, what we see is there is consciousness, that we humans have consciousness, and other living beings also have consciousness. Let's focus for the time being on consciousness as is manifest in human beings. Now, as well as even if you consider other living beings also, the point is, where does this consciousness come from? Although researchers have studied exhaustively the brain, despite studying for decades, even centuries, they've not been able to find out any one point which is in the brain which is the source of consciousness. So now here we are focusing on the theoretical aspect, but this also becomes related with the experimental aspect. But I'll focus on, this answers the summary, I'll get into specific evidences later. But the point is, within the theoretical framework, the material explanation of consciousness, or explaining consciousness from a material perspective, has failed and is continuing to fail. So from a theoretical perspective, definitely there has been a substantial depiction of correlation. Yes, that there are certain emotions which are induced when certain parts or areas of the brain are activated. But this is correlation, this is not causation. Causation and correlation are not the same thing. Correlation simply means that one phenomena is associated with another phenomena. Causation means that one phenomena is caused by the second phenomena. So what is the difference between the two? So the simple example is that suppose someone is happy, and now that happiness expresses itself neurologically as the secretion of certain chemicals in certain parts of the brain, and physically it expresses itself as a smile or as a laugh. So now there are three things. There is the feeling of happiness, there are the activation of certain chemicals in the brain, and then there is the expression of a smile on the face. So now the activation of certain chemicals in the brain is correlated with the smile on the face, but it is not exactly caused. The feeling of happiness is in and of itself a distinct phenomena from the secretion of chemicals in the brain. The secretion of chemicals in the brain alone does not make one happy. Researchers who have tried in psychiatry to try to identify which specific chemicals need to be secreted for a person to, say, overcome depression, they found that this does not, that just pumping those chemicals into the brain does not lead to a person being able to permanently counter depression. Yes, it just temporarily does counter depression, just as a person who is unhappy, that person artificially puts on, plasters a smile on one's face, that person might temporarily feel better. But that is not a long-term result. We cannot carry on a facade of happiness for a long time through physical expression of through physical expressions if there is no real feeling of happiness within. Similarly, just injecting some chemical into the brain, or taking some pills that increase the presence of a particular chemical in the brain does not lead to happiness. Does not, it may temporarily give you a good feeling, but it doesn't last for long. So the point is that from the theoretical point perspective, researchers have been able to find correlation but not causation. So the correlation between, say, the emotions that we have and the corresponding areas of the brain that are activated, that is well documented. But correlation should not be mistaken for causation. In fact, from the theoretical perspective, there is a spectacular missing link in how that which is how matter can somehow produce the ability to experience matter. How matter, say, my tongue is matter, and if I eat a gulab jamun, the gulab jamun is matter. It is made of the same essential elements. So how can the tongue experience taste of gulab jamun? If I keep the gulab jamun on the table is not experiencing the taste. Put it on my tongue, I experience the taste. So how does matter develop the ability to experience matter? From a theoretical perspective also, there is absolutely no satisfactory explanation. And although many researches do indicate that the brain is correlated with emotions, but the correlation is not. Point which I am making is, even from the dawn of the advent of materialism in science, that is, so one of the prominent followers of Darwin was Huxley, Thomas Huxley, and he's called the bulldog of Darwin, who campaigned for the theory of evolution on Darwin's behalf. But even he said that how consciousness can emerge from matter, from brain substance, is as miraculous, as inexplicable as a jinn appearing in the story of Aladdin by doing something such as lighting a lamp or calling a name or rubbing something, whatever. So it's just an inexplicable phenomena. And similarly, there are Nobel laureate neurosurgeons, Dr. Wilder Penfield, Sherrington, John Eccles. So these are all Nobel, not just ordinary neuroscientists. They are Nobel laureate neuroscientists, and they have, after many years of study, concluded that consciousness requires a non-material explanation. So, for example, Dr. Wilder Penfield said that the brain is like a computer, but its programmer is somewhere outside. Similarly, there's another Rogers Perry is another eminent physicist, another eminent neuroscientist, and he said that we have to look for in consciousness, rather than merely looking for a upward causation, going from matter to consciousness, we also have to look at downward causation. That consciousness is a distinct entity which produces which interacts with matter and which creates matter within matter, the feeling that it is the sensation of being alive, the appearance of being alive rather. So anyway, this is from the theoretical. Within theory, there is no satisfactory explanation of how matter can produce consciousness. And within theory, if we consider a non-material source of consciousness, then the explanation of consciousness becomes much more intelligible. Now, going to experiment, there is in science we can do experiments where the object is under our control. But when the object is, say for example, if a stone is falling, then we can throw a stone up and we can make the stone fall. But if suppose the benchmark for verifying Newton's theory of gravitation was that, because Newton's theory says that the way objects move on the earth is similar to the way the objects move in this space. So if the benchmark for that theory had been made that Newton should be able to control the movement of the planets or the movement of the satellites, and if say by increasing the force applied to say the moon will move faster. If that sort of benchmark for observation had been made, then Newton's theory would not have been verifiable even now. So the point is that experiments can be done on those things which are under control, which can be controlled. So if some things cannot be controlled, then experiments can't be done. And then when experiments can't be done, alternative methods have to be used. So now with respect to reincarnation, the soul moving from one body to another, we can't control the subject to do an experiment. Controlling the subject means that we can't control that, okay, this person is going to die and this person is going to incarnate over here and this person should be able to remember this set of facts. We can't control this phenomena. Similarly with respect to outer body experiences also, we can't, with near death experiences and we cannot put a person artificially to a situation of near death and then see whether that soul gets projected outside or something like that. So experiments are not possible in this, and this does not mean that this necessarily has to go out of the arena of science, because when we look at the past, when there are many areas in science also where knowledge is not acquired using experimentation. For example, with respect to generally theories of origins and theories of the past. So much of the theories, for example, we say that the universe, the mainstream accepted scientific theory is some variant of the Big Bang theory, I mean superstring or whatever, might be further developments, but the Big Bang theory is largely accepted as a theory of the origin of the universe. Now nobody can conduct an experiment to replicate the theory. And similarly with respect to say many other tectonic plate theory, that the earth was say one tectonic plate earlier, then it has split and then that's how different continents have come about. When we go back to history, there are many theories within science which are not, on which we cannot do experiments to verify them, and that alone should not be made as a ground for rejecting those theories. So therefore here a different method is to be used. We cannot just use experiment in the sense of controlling an environment and making certain things happen in a certain way, because these are the planet, the movement of the planet, movement of say tectonic plates or the origin of the universe. These are events which are not repeatable and controllable by us. So what can be done in such situations? Science uses a different methodology. It is called as IBE. It is inference to best explanation. So we try to make as careful and as rigorous an observation as possible, and after that observation after the observation is made, we try to find out the best explanation for that observation by eliminating all other alternative explanations. So this is like something like who done it investigative novel, in which if a crime has been committed, person has been murdered, then who all could have done that crime? Who had come in that house? What are the ways for coming into that house? What are the ways in which this person could have been killed? We try to eliminate, investigator tries to eliminate various explanations. Still, the most intelligible explanation remains, and that is accepted. So similarly, with respect to so the evidences for reincarnation are not in terms of experiment, but in terms of observations and then inferences to best explanation based on that observation. So what is the evidence? There are certain people who are able to remember their past lives. Now, the certain people who are able to remember their past lives, now the various alternative explanations need to be taken into consideration. So, okay, could it be that this person didn't remember, but it's just a coincidence that both the memories came together? But then there is so Stevenson and subsequent scientists have developed a scale of credibility and scale of evidence. How many points does the person remember? And what are the correlations in the remembrance? So I will answer about the credibility of reincarnation of past life memories in a separate question, and similarly with near-death experiences. But the point is that there are multiple evidences. The sheer number of memories that are recollected, the number of things that are recollected, the commonality or uncommonality of those particular memories. So there is a scale on the strength of evidence. It's not just a chance. And further, there are past life behaviors which are continued in terms of certain phobias. Then there are birthmarks which are there, and there are overall the cultural acceptability or unacceptability. All those factors come into the picture, and that way, so if that person had no contact with the other person and no possibility of contact, if the number of things that are remembered are so many that it's unlikely to have come about by chance, then by chance or by guesswork, then the credibility increases. So the point is, with respect to scientific research or scientific evidence for reincarnation, the evidence has to be in terms of inference to best explanation, and that is gradually being accepted, as initially the researching for reincarnation is treated with skepticism, but that is the way all scientific breakthroughs do happen. So, but gradually, as the broad conceptions are made clear, that how the methodology is made clear, and how is this a progress that is explained. How is this a progress? The progress is in terms of actually how the understanding of the human person deepens, who we are and what is it that is going to bring meaning and purpose in our life, how that understanding deepens, and how life and the quality of life and the satisfaction of life improves. This and our own understanding of the human person increases. So bringing a scientific dimension, spiritual dimension into science is not going to restrict knowledge, it is rather going to expand knowledge, expand scientific knowledge. When this understanding is presented properly, then the evidence for reincarnation will be accepted. So there is a gradual change that is happening, and even now, as compared to 30, 40, 50 years ago, when Stevenson started the research, the acceptability of reincarnation has increased much more, and this will keep increasing as more and more research is done and more evidence mounts, and more the limitations of sticking to an exclusively naturalistic approach are recognized by scientists. And once they are recognized, then non-natural explanations will be more open-mindedly explored. So when we present evidence, what we should focus on is not necessary, it's not necessary for some evidence to be accepted by the entire body of scientists or even the mainstream body of scientists. As long as it stands the test of intellectual scrutiny, as long as that evidence is acquired according to methods that are similarly used in other fields of scientific inquiry, and as long as there are credible scientists, even if they're in the minority, who accept the evidence for reincarnation, we have to understand that every culture operates under a certain bias, and the mainstream scientific community operates under the presumption, which often becomes a bias, of naturalism or reductionism, and because of that they're not yet open-minded. But we don't have to necessarily accept that presumption or bias, and by staying open-minded to the evidence and open-mindedly evaluating that evidence and presenting that evidence open-mindedly, we can actually help in the scientific increasing the scientific acceptability of reincarnation. Thank you. Hare Krishna.